welcome back to another Just 5 Mins. What have we got today? Well, we all aspire to be something better, don't we? Oh dear, the jokes are getting even worse in 2024. But anyway, that's what we're talking about is .NET Aspire. Okay. Um, but interestingly, I was going to get some music to do that, like a time rewind, like they do off those movies and things to go back in time or something. Anyway, I can't be bothered to do that. Sorry. But interestingly, to give a bit of context, there's a lot of these types of things out there, even back with things like service mesh and stuff like that. But Aspire and what I'm alluding to, DAPR, DAPR, is not a service mesh. But let's go back to DAPR. Okay, so not to be confused with DAPR, and I think I've mentioned that in a previous podcast. DAPR with an ER, a double P and ER at the end is, I think it was Stack Overflow originally. Yeah, it's like a micro ORM that's developed over the years. Actually, very good. It was a brilliant alternative to things like Entity Framework. These days, Entity Framework, in my honest opinion, has got really good, but it still can be quite chunky for depending on what you're building, of course. And that's where DAPR actually, if you say it like that, comes into play. But anyway, back to DAPR. With an R. So DAPR is a portable event-driven runtime that makes it easy for developers to build resilient, stateless, and stateful applications that run in the cloud and the edge. And yes, I did read that from a website. But ultimately, it uses a sidecar approach, they call it, where you can bolt in different bits that you need. But if you can imagine, and I'm going to use that word microservices, but anyway, but if you're building something that needs a bit more chunk, I mean, I've tried using DAPR and it's great. It worked really well. I did some noddy, crazy stuff where I took an example, and it's basically to build like microservices, but it handles all things like, how do you, if you've got microservices, and people who have built these things will know this pain, is how do you keep the stateful or stateless type things up in the air? How do you do that? How do you connect if one microservice is meant to have just one little database? How do all of those things connect together? So things like DAPR, there are others, and we'll get to the latest one, Aspire, shortly. But DAPR, that's what it does. It gives you that database, fine-grained sort of control over database. It's got resiliency, things like back-off retries, and I don't know if it's got like poly, which is that's to do with all like resilience retries and all things like that. I'll have to check that actually. But anyway, DAPR also has message broker, workflow sort of processes. So if you're building an application that will use multiple microservices, and I tried a noddy application, like I said, I had a couple of Node.js microservices and a couple of .NET Core, well, just .NET microservices, just to see how it hung together, and it was relatively straightforward, to be honest. But would you use it in just a basic app? No, you wouldn't. I wouldn't anyway. But even a medium-sized app, you might find, especially these days, that it's easier to just deploy a small microservice change rather than the whole monolith. But anyway, that's another topic for another day, isn't it? So DAPR is where that sort of like, that was my first foray into something like this. But then we come along now to the new version. Well, I'll say new version. I shouldn't say that. It's .NET Aspire. Okay. A while ago, I got really excited looking at things like Project Tye, TYE, from Microsoft. And I'm going to go over 5 minutes, by the way. But that Project Tye was to be able to do where, again, if you were building microservices, it would let you do things like spin up and do all the orchestration of your containers. Okay. So, and it would give you a nice dashboard, so you could develop and have all that intercommunication stuff, sorry, going on locally. Okay. There was something else as well, and it was essentially what's his name, David Fowler at Microsoft, um, distinguished engineer David Fowler, who also is credited with leading gRPC as well, I believe, back in the day. But that was Project Tie, and there was something else I forgot. Um, there's a few of these things. There's Orleans as well, which is a Microsoft distributed actor-based framework. We'll maybe do that another day. But ultimately, what's the difference between .NET Aspire and DAPR, for instance? Well, they are complementary technologies. DAPR essentially allows you to pick and choose what you want to use, where and when, with this sort of sidecar approach, they call it, a sidecar pattern. But .NET Aspire is definitely more of an opinionated configuration about the underlying cloud technologies, without abstracting them. So DAPR tends to abstract a lot more and gives you that framework, that abstraction framework to build microservices and the communications and everything. So .NET Aspire is going a little bit further to make it, and it's obviously all horses for courses, and sometimes I like that because then you're not going, well, okay, there's a million different choices here. Which one should I use? And of course, that comes down to, well, what is it? But with .NET Aspire, it's saying, well, look, for the majority of cases, and let's face it, that's what we'll be building generally. Here's a template. Here's the opinionated configuration. Off you go. Okay, but it does work in the same way. It's got like a nice dashboard about all your different deployments, so you can build microservice based apps that talk web apps. They can talk web APIs. They can do all sorts of different things, but ultimately it gives you that framework. So before you know it, if you're building more than just a few microservices, if you're trying to go on the point of micro services, as in they're all very specific units of work, then obviously sooner or later you're going to need either Kubernetes or something. Well, the DAPR and .NET Aspire and Orleans and all those sorts of things are giving you that additional help, providing that framework for you. But .NET Aspire is good in the way, I think DAPR was as well, in all fairness, but .NET Aspire is giving you a localized version. So when you're building all of this, you're building it locally in the way that it will work in the cloud. So that you can lift and shift to the cloud, but you've got that. That's what I found difficult getting started. Well, what bit goes where, and how do I tie this together? So anyway, so .NET Aspire and technically DAPR, which I should probably do a refresh on. I did a podcast, oh crikey, about a year or two back now, but it has evolved, certainly with the workflow mechanism in DAPR, which allows actions and things to sort of flow through different microservices. So I will have to revisit that one. But because I've gone well over, and does this even relate to you? Well, if you're not a developer, and certainly in the .NET space, maybe not, but we'll do some other stuff in the next coming weeks as well. But that's what I've got for now, and it's really gone over the just 5 minutes. So thanks for your patience if you've got this far, and take care, and we'll catch you on the next one.